Hi, I'm Mary Mancini, and this is the Lucy's Record Shop podcast, where you can hear stories behind the legendary 90s Nashville record store and all-ages punk club. Before we jump into today's episode, I have to say thank you to everyone who made the Lucy's 30th anniversary celebration so incredibly special. It was better than any of us imagined it would be. So amazing. Thank you to all the bands who played: Drew the Drifter, Amira the Weirdo, Freebase Masons, Paul Birch and John Langford, Casual Sex, Total Wife, Spider Virus, 12 Volt Negative Earth, Black Bra, Ready for Death, Electric Python, Shtook It, Tower Defense, and Kat from Fun Girls from Mount Pilot, who made a special appearance, and Hans Condor. And Ronzo and Tim from Stone Deep for emceeing the day. Thanks to Doug Lehman for helping to put together the live Twitch stream. There is a video, which I'll edit and get out there for everyone to see as soon as possible. Thank you to April Kendall, who helped sell merch while I was pulled away. Thanks to WXNA, who had their DJs come and play outside the venue for like 12 hours straight. Such a great way to keep the party going. Thank you to Janetta and the Eden Place food truck. Thanks to all who helped promote the show: Jason Wilkins and WNXP, another wonderful community asset, PJ Kinzer of the Nashville scene, Dave Paulson and the Tennessean, WXNA DJs Paul Birch of the Works Progress Radio Hour, Jonathan Marks of Transmission, and Laurel Creech of All About Nashville. And of course, Michael Eads and the We Own This Town podcast. And a very special, ginormous thank you to everyone at Dark Matter who made the jam-packed day run so smoothly. It really was amazing, a well-oiled machine. And thank you to everyone who came out and hung out. It was so great to see all your faces again and to witness the many, many reunions that happened as well. You guys, you did it again. You made the Lucy's community come alive one more time, and I just can't thank you enough. And now, on to the show. Some people know Doyle Davis as the co-owner of the Nashville-based, internationally known and respected Grimey's new and Preloved music. Others know him as Mellow D, the host of the radio show Groovy Potential on WXNA. His business cards say Doyle Davis, Vinylist, which really couldn't be more perfect because Doyle has been a champion of vinyl as a music delivery system his entire life. When Doyle first came to Lucy's in the early 90s, he was a little underwhelmed. It wasn't very well stocked, and he was used to The Great Escape, which had tons and tons of music and vinyl. But he did appreciate the vibe. And when, after years of almost exclusively listening to jazz and R&B and funk, he heard Pavement's Slanted and Enchanted, he became hooked on indie rock. And he bought a ton of records at Lucy's, and he brought a lot of them to the interview, kind of like a show and tell. We talk a lot on this podcast about the importance of community and finding your people. When Doyle started listening to indie rock, he fell into yet another warm and welcoming subculture. The kind of culture and community that's a natural extension of people who place a high value on listening to music on vinyl, and where the bands place themselves on the same level, sometimes literally, if you've ever been to a house show, as their audience. Doyle listened and collected and traveled all over the Southeast to see bands like Pavement and Yola Tango and Rodan, even if that show was an accident. Doyle innately knows the importance of community, and in the early days of coming to Lucy's and working at The Great Escape, he honed that into a skill. When Mike Grimes opened Grimey's in 1999, just about a year after Lucy's closed, it already had a community vibe to it. That was important to Mike. When he had the brilliant idea to bring in Doyle as a co-owner, everything fell into place, mostly because Doyle shared Mike's vision of creating the Floyd's barbershop of record stores. Grimey's quickly became a community of people who not only loved music, but who loved listening to music on vinyl. Today, new vinyl sales are strong, but for about the first 10 years or so Grimey's was open, they were definitely not. Doyle has been in the record business for over 30 years. He's seen a lot, and he's weathered industry changes and market manipulations with creativity, humor, and a wonderfully infectious positive attitude. He's helped build a successful record store from the ground up, and through it all, he's made vinyl shine.
Well, my name is Doyle Davis. I am currently co-owner of Grimey's new and Preloved music. And my musical origin story, I don't know. I wish I could put my finger on it. Always drawn to music, this as long ago as I can remember. I mean, when I was a kid, I had some older friends in the neighborhood, and a friend of one of my dad's best friends, who was a couple of years older than me, and they had records, and that's all I wanted to do was listen to those records. What's on them? What's it sound like? I went through my parents' records. My mom had some cool ones. My dad did not. Trini Lopez, I think, was the most represented artist in his collection.
And what about your mom?
My mom had early Beatles records. She also had John Lee Hooker and Bo Diddley records. She had a few Chess records and Hank Ballard, the Midnighters. I was like, damn, Mom's hip. But they're both from the Delta. So, but neither one of them is particularly musically inclined, and no one else really in my family. But I mean, I used to ask for records for Christmas on my Christmas wish list. I mean, I asked for toys too, but I mean, records, I remember really thinking hard about which records to put on that list and hoping to get them. So, but it's just been from a very early age. And then I had a grandmother, my mom's mother, Mimi is what we called her, and she indulged my passion for music. So we were living in Jackson, Tennessee at this point. I was born in Mississippi. We moved to Jackson when I was 6, so I really grew up there. And we had a record store in town called Sounds of Music, but also Montgomery Ward's had a record department,
Yeah, those record store record departments.
Yeah, exactly.
Not record store. Department store records departments were cool.
They were very cool. Yeah. And they had cutouts. And I have all kinds of memories. I could talk about that all day. What are these Funkadelic records? They look scary. I didn't listen to any of those till quite a few years later. But my grandmother would take me out shopping, and she would say, now, Doyle, go pick out a record. And kind of no matter what store we were at, I could find a record, it seemed like. So growing up, I always had those. And then, as soon as I could get a paper route, my motivation was to get money to buy records. And then a stereo. I wanted my own stereo in my bedroom and not the cheap plastic thing I had.
And when did you first know that you wanted to make music your career? And that you could make music your career? I'm
just now realizing that. No, I fell into music totally by accident, only because I guess it's the only thing that my passion only grew for and never waned. And, when I was looking to get a part-time job, I'll get a job at a record store. That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Then I realized, I enjoy my part-time record store job more than any of my real jobs. And I really look forward to going in, seeing what new records have been acquired since I was last there. This was at The Great Escape, by the way. That was my first real record store job. I started out part-time there, and then just over a few years, I quit my other jobs. I was doing bartending. I was waiting tables. I quit all of that and focused full-time on The Great Escape. And they just kept teaching me more and more new things and promoting me. And, I was lucky in that there were some managers that left. So things just kind of timed up right where I kind of moved up kind of quickly there. And I was some sort of assistant manager and one of the head record buyers within just a few years of working there.
Wow, what year was that?
This would have been, I started there in 86. And certainly by 89, 90, I was full-time doing record buys, pricing a lot of the collectible records. I went to Tower to buy my new records. That was, once they opened, that was like the,
Oh, because Great Escape was just used.
Just used. which frustrated me a lot along the way. But
did you ever try to get them to?
Oh God,
stock?
yes. That is probably one of the chief reasons why there's a Grimey's, to be honest with you.
Interesting.
Well, I would go to the owner, Gary Walker. Sadly passed away a couple years ago. He was, he could be a cantankerous old man at times, but I learned an awful lot from him. He was a great mentor in a lot of ways. But I went to him and I was like, there's no independent record store really, like we could do that. I know all these people in town that are buying records that are interested in those records, and they travel to other cities to go shopping. There were great record shops in Atlanta. Louisville had Ear Ecstasy, which was like a paradise at the time for records. And there's nothing like that in Nashville. Let's do that. And his thinking was always there's so much more profit in the used product. So, just resistance to do that, the lack of it being done otherwise, until you came along with Lucy's,
Well, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
Because when I did meet you, when I did open Lucy's, it was Doyle from the Grayscape. I don't know if you had a last name. Doyle from the Grayscape.
Right.
Which was awesome. And then you started showing up. How did you first hear about Lucy's?
I really can't put my finger on it. I think probably I just read it in the Nashville scene or something. I mean, I read that paper every single week, usually on the day it came out on my lunch break. And, I'm interested in music, anything in there that, see the club listings, who's playing, et cetera. But I feel like it took me a while to come down there and actually check it out. Like, I don't know, at least some months. And when I did, I got to say I was a little underwhelmed.
Sure.
I expected more inventory, a little bit more of a,
I've heard that before.
Full-blown record store experience. But at the same time, you did have things I was definitely interested in and looking for. And, I honestly felt like engaging with you and just seeing the vibe of what you were doing there. I was like, this place has a lot of heart, and you got to support it because that's how things grow, right?
Yeah.
You want more inventory, you got to be making more money so you can afford to buy it.
Yeah.
I was really, since we've talked about The Great Escape and all that, I was so in this world, just swirling around with used records. And at the time had a buddy who knew a lot about jazz, and he was, giving me tips. He worked at the store, Daniel Cooper. And he worked at like Philly's, or I can't remember the name of the record shop in Philly, but he knew the catalog numbers of jazz records. Anyway,
wow.
So buys would come in and he'd be like, "Ooh, you should check that one out," et cetera. And so I kind of went down this rabbit hole with jazz and soul and R&B and funk all at the same time. And I was just spending all my time listening to old music that was new to me. One of my coworkers played me Pavement, Slanted, and Enchanted. And for whatever reason, it just really hit a nerve. I was like, that's cool. Is that a keyboard or guitar? I can't even tell.
Mm-hmm.
That cool little noisy, weird part, that's the hook. And then the ba 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 da ba, they're all coming in, and it's just like, this is crazy, weird, and super accessible all at the same time, and it rocks. And so that was one of the bands I was hoping to find when I went to Lucy's. It's like, Tower had new records. They just didn't do a great job as a record consumer. And again, traveling, Nashville was also still very much a secondary live music market. So all the indie bands I might want to see were going to Atlanta. And I was going down to Atlanta to see George Clinton and P-Funk. They were still kind of in their prime. And, I go to record stores when I'm there, and I'd be like, oh, look at all these records. I didn't even know they're in print or available, and they don't have these at Tower in Nashville. But at your store, it was very indie rock centric. I mean, that's primarily what you stocked. And it just sort of dawned on me. I'm like, these labels are still making vinyl. So many. I mean, this is early 90s, and the major record labels were stopping making vinyl. They would do sort of a boutique pressing for the right kind of band, like Nirvana is going to get pressed. But, so many things were CD or cassette only. And I just remember sort of having this realization. It's like, I really enjoy listening to records. It's just, none of this stuff people talk about with vinyl now was anywhere in my head. I just always preferred records. The thing I was most wrong about ever in my life was I thought these CDs will never catch on. Who's going to want this? I seriously thought that I was the last person in my group of friends to even get a CD player. But they were forcing my hand. It's like, what am I going to buy cassettes if I want to buy a new record? So I thought, I'm just going to dig in here. I'm going to discover this music. These labels and these bands are still making vinyl. And I just kept finding one cool one after another. Stereo Lab, Yola Tengo. Now that's one I'll always associate with Lucy's Record Shop. And not because they played there. That was a really cool show, and that came later. But I actually brought that record with me. Painful is the one. And these are all copies of records I bought at Lucy's that I brought in my little bag.
Can you pull all of them? Oh, are you going to pull them out one at a time?
Well, no, I'll
pull all of them out.
Is there anything you want to talk about?
Whoa.
I could have done so many more. I started thinking about it, and I was like, "Oh my God, I've got tons of records I bought at that shop."
Okay, that's like a what 2 to 3 inch stack you brought right there.
Yeah, and that's just LPs. I got 7 inches and 10 inches. So this Yola Tengo record, Painful. I really wasn't familiar with them prior. I had not listened to Fake Book. I feel like I was aware of it. I mean, I still read the music magazines. I wasn't obsessing over it. I was listening to this other stuff, and I can't remember if you recommended this record to me or if it was playing in the store or what, but I was like, I've got to get this Yola Tengo record. And I took it home and I just played it over and over and over. And I hadn't done this in ages where I'm forcing friends to listen to it. Isn't this great? It blew my mind. And I think I was back in the shop telling you how over the moon I was with this record. And you mentioned you knew them. I was like, well, that's cool. And I swear you told me they were playing a show in Louisville, Kentucky. Like you were aware of their current tour behind this record. Because I don't know how I would have found out about it otherwise. There's no internet at that time to go check.
I know, right?
Right? So on a wild hair, I jumped in the car and I drove up to Louisville to see Yola Tengo, this band I just fell in love with. And I get to Ear Ecstasy. First thing I do is run to the record store. There's a poster for the show, and then there's a big note. It's like the show has been moved. And I'm like, oh no, it says it's in Indiana. And I'm like, what? Where am I got to go to Indiana now to see the show? I didn't know that you just drive over the bridge in downtown Louisville and you're in Indiana. So it was just on the other side of the river, basically. So I went and found the venue since I didn't know where I was going, and it was in an old theater, really cool spot. And my plan was, all right, now I know where the venue is. I'm just going to find a place close by where I can get maybe a burger and a beer or something and wait for showtime. And somebody walked out of the theater and it's like, hey, what's going on? I'm like, oh, I'm here for the Yola Tengo show tonight. I really want to, make sure I've got my bearings here. So I just got here a little early. I drove up from Nashville. He's like, you drove from Nashville? Yeah. Just to see these guys? Yeah. Well, they're sound checking now. You want to come in?
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm going to go get a burger.
Exactly. So I went in, and I don't remember exactly what they were playing, but there was just like maybe 5 people in the room, and the band was on stage playing, and it was awesome. And I watched them sound check, and then they left the stage, and at showtime, I was right there, right down front, and amazing show. Just blew my mind. And
every single time.
Every single time. Never seen a show by them that wasn't
ever.
Phenomenal.
Right.
I know, right?
It's incredible.
It is. And then after the show, I was new to indie rock. I was just getting my feet wet. And after the show, they just walk out into the audience and start talking to all the people that are there. I'm like, well, this is pretty cool.
Welcome to indie rock.
Yeah, I know, right? You see a show by a band every bit as good as any band you're going to see in an arena anywhere. And it's up close and personal, and then you get to just talk to them afterwards. That's pretty cool.
Do you remember what the conversation was?
Well, yeah, because one of the first things I said is, hey, I know Mary Mancini from Lucy's Record Shop. And Ira's like, oh, yeah, how's Mary doing?
Oh,
so
that's very sweet.
Yeah, so we talked. I don't know. He talked to me for it was probably more like 10 minutes, but it felt like half an hour or something. Just really cool. I just gushed about, discovering them and how great they were.
Yeah.
Loved your shop and all this kind of stuff. So that led to a real personal connection right there with, an artist who was very new to me and to this day still absolutely one of my favorite bands of all time.
Of all time, yeah. And they still come out and talk to everybody.
Yeah, I know, right? Quick side note, I was down in Atlanta seeing them at the Cotton Club once. And, after the show, they come out. We're all known about talking to Ira and Georgia and James. And some security guard comes over and says, "Hey, there's no meet and greet after this show. Nobody scheduled a meet and greet. You all got to go." It was like a meet and greet. It felt dirty to hear this,
industry term, right?
Yes.
Like this industry gross, schedule meet and greet. No, does not go
this
with that.
Total like organic hang with these artists, and it's called a meet and greet. Yeah, so I mean, I fell into your culture big time and started hanging out and going to the store more and more and going to shows.
What else you got there in your stack?
Well, I actually discovered Stereolab at Lollapalooza in Atlanta and bought a couple of records there at the show. And then when I got back to Lucy's in Nashville, you had this one, which I didn't see down there, Space Age Bachelor Pad music.
Oh, wow. This is a good one, too.
It is a good one. I love that it's got a easy listening side and a new wave side. John Spencer Blues Explosion, Extra Width. I became a monster fan of these guys, too. And
man, you're pulling out all the hits.
Yeah.
What else? What's next?
Oh, you want me to run through the stack? Okay.
Yeah. Let's do the whole stack.
Unrest, Imperial for
Yeah. How do you say that?
I don't know.
Imperial FFRR.
Teen Beat, great label. Pretty big fan. I've got a decent stack of their records. I probably bought them all at your place. I just pulled that one out because it was the first one I remember. Like buying that record kind of turned me on to all the others.
Yeah, they had a bunch of great 7-inches too.
Yeah.
With like pornographic covers.
Yeah, I know, right? The Tsunami record, the Deep In. I just fell so in love with Jenny Toomey and her voice. And I got to meet them once at a party in Louisville at the Rocket House. Yeah.
How did that happen?
It's featured in that movie that's also got some scenes shot. What's that called? Half Cocked.
How did you meet them? What
I
were you doing up there?
I went to see Pavement. They were playing an outdoor show at some weird sports bar type club that I think was probably a rock club for like a year. But they were playing outside, and I met my friends Terry and Rhonda at that show, and they told me about this party. I guess Terry had been corresponding with his indie rock heroes, like writing them letters, and they were writing him back, and somebody told him about this party, and Shellac was supposed to play. And I was like, wow, I don't want to miss that. So I tried to find a hotel room. It was Derby weekend in Louisville. I drove probably as far as 40 miles or something out on the interstate, just going to every single hotel. Again, pre-internet, I didn't know how to, there's really no other way to do it. I couldn't find a hotel room.
That's right. Like you can't call from your car.
So I found a rest stop area and just slept in my car.
That's dedication.
Yeah. And we made plans. Well, I really enjoyed these two new people I just met, and they were telling me about this place, and it sounded like a really fun day. We had made plans to meet at a diner, did some record shopping, all the usual stuff, getting to know each other. And we ended up that afternoon at this party, and Pavement's there. Like we just saw them the night before, and they're at this party, and Tsunami was there. The Cocktails were there. Just like all these indie rock royalty.
Yeah. Was it a derby party? Had they all come?
Not really, but kind of. It was in, the Rocket House. At the time, Rodan lived there. And all I know is that at some point in the afternoon, there was a phone call, and Steve Albini said that they were not going to be able to make it. So Shellac was not going to play. So Rodan said, well, it's our house. We got all our gear here. It's where we practice. We'll play for you guys.
Nice.
But that was a really, really fun time. And, just again, all these associations made around this cool indie music that was still pretty new to me, and just seemed
But that you dove in.
Dove in, absolutely. And then one of my favorite bands of all time, far and away to this day, still is Guided by Voices. And I bought this record at Lucy's, and I lost my mind. I don't know if you remember me, because I bought Vampire and Titus. I think was the newest studio album at the time when I really found out about this band. And I bought that at Lucy's. And one day I walked in, and this was on the wall new.
What's the title?
This is Forever Since Breakfast. This is their debut EP.
Was it a reissue?
No, it's not. I just assumed that all of a sudden people were finding out about them. And I've read now, that they pressed 500 copies of all their early records and barely sold any of them. They just were in boxes in somebody's basement. And so my guess is that now there was demand for Guided by Voices product in the market, that somebody had got a hold of these and got them to a distributor. That's a pretty collectible record now. That's their very first EP. It's only been reissued once. And you had these as well, which these were imports only. Devil Between My Toes is their first full-length LP, and Earful of Wax is a compilation from all their early first 5 albums. So,
I'm so glad you got them.
Me too. These are also quite collectible. They're clear vinyl pressed in Germany. But see, between discovering them and then going and seeing them live, I saw them open for Superchunk at the Exit Inn about 2 weeks before B1000 came out. And they had the record at the show. So I bought B1000 early from them, and every 7-inch that they had at the merch table, which is like 7 of them or something. I just bought everything they had. So I knew B1000 and the current stuff and Vampire on Titus, but those old records had never been reissued at that point. They did later, but there was no way to find them. They just were not available. And all of a sudden to have the first album and a compilation of all the others was pretty cool to me. I felt like I got all the backstory right at once, and again, just discovered them at your place.
Do you ever let any of your records go?
Yeah. Not these.
No, of course not.
There's a small part of my collection that you might call fluid, where either new records I've purchased that just didn't stick over the long haul, or used records. I mean, I've been doing radio shows for years in Nashville, funk and soul shows, and now a sort of genre-less show on WXNA. And, what I did for years with the funk and soul show is I'd buy records to play on the radio. I might have a bunch of records that had this killer cut and everything else is a ballad I don't care for. So I've quit. I traded all that stuff away when I quit doing the funk show. If it wasn't an album that really meant something to me as a piece of work, I didn't need to keep it. I got into it. I helped form a record label with the leader of the Dynamites and kind of managed them for a little bit.
And that was called?
The label was called Out of Sight Records, and we got a deal with 30 Tigers and released an album called Kaboom with Charles Walker and the Dynamites, Charles Wig Walker, classic soul singer from Nashville, Tennessee, who's still doing it. You can go down to Acme Feed and Seed on Saturday afternoons, and he sings old soul songs for a brunch, and he's great. He's still got his whole voice. He never blew his voice out. And anyway, so we got the old soul singer, OG soul singer with the hot young band, and gave that a whirl. But, we sold a lot of records, but we put a lot of money into it. We didn't even break even. So I was kind of like, all right, well, it was a fun ride, and I got to see what that side of the business is like. And it's a lot harder than I want to work with no guarantee of going anywhere. I mean, you've really got to really have a passion for that. And everything I've tried, I come back to, you know what I'm good at? Record store.
Right.
Yeah, for real. I mean,
but that's cool that you try, though. And also, I would imagine when you do try these other things, it gives you a better understanding of record store.
For sure.
The manufacturing process and signing a band or putting a band together and producing and getting the album actually made. And
that was my first experience ever
and made,
with a vinyl pressing plant, because we had to get our record pressed. So we did it at URP, because they were
that's United
Record Pressing here in Nashville. They were the only pressing plant I even knew about, and they were here in Nashville. Still, I think the largest pressing plant in all of the United States.
There are more now in Nashville, too.
There are. They're popping up everywhere, it seems like. Boutique vinyl pressing plants. A company called GZ from Czechoslovakia is opening a big new plant here in Nashville. So URP, United, is more than doubling their capacity. They've got 40 presses now, which are all legacy machines, which means they're old machines. They quit making them in 92. And so almost all the machines have been pressing all the records through this big vinyl revival we've been going through are all these old machines. So they constantly need upkeep, repair, parts. Parts are hard to find. I heard people talking about 3D printing. You can't 3D print a record, but 3D printing the parts that are no longer manufactured or tooled to make some of these old machines run that wouldn't otherwise. But then in the last couple of years, they've started making new pressing machines. So URP is adding 48 to their 40. They're adding 48 of the new model. And like Vinyl Lab has one machine now, and they press a lot of records. I mean, you can still crank out a lot of records with one machine. They're adding a second, and I believe it's like on a boat right now on the way to Nashville. And by August something, they're going to double their capacity. And they're adding like a craft brewery, tap room, and live music venue at some point will open as well. So you can go watch the records through the big glass.
Shut.
Yeah,
up.
yeah. They have like floor to ceiling windows. You can see them pressing the records in there.
Oh my God. It's like the record pressing plant version of Krispy Kreme.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Right. So that sounds like fun.
It really does.
And the Memphis record pressing plant is also doubling in size, machines and employees. And so when all this capacity is online in about 18 months, Tennessee will be the vinyl pressing capital of the world. Pretty cool. And, you know, it's
really cool.
It's manufacturing jobs. It's, you know, it's made in the USA. You know, we used to say at Grimey's it's kind of cool because all our products are manufactured in the USA. But as things got wonky with capacity, more and more of the records in our store are pressed in Europe. They're pressed all over the world. And the venture capitalist community or whoever's got the money for this is seeing that pressing records seems to be kind of a gold mine right now. I mean, everybody that was running 2 shifts is going to 3 shifts. And they figured they're pressing about half the demand. The capacity now is about half of what it, which is crazy. If you think about if they were able to press like 380 million records a year, which is what they think the true demand is, that would be more records that were pressed in 1978 at the height of vinyl.
Do you think it's going to go away?
No.
You're like, Mary.
Well, let's see. This whole thing started in the current trend of growth in vinyl starts basically in 2007. And it's done nothing but increase. And then in the last 2 years with the pandemic, it went absolutely through the roof.
Okay, now forget it, just back off. Horizons offer nothing, just whack off. Big top hat officials won't pay out. Join the winner's circle or stay out.
I was going to ask you something.
Okay.
So I brought this Pavement record.
Yes.
And I don't know. It was a while ago. It's still got the Lucy's price tag on it.
There's my writing.
That's your writing. That's your handwriting from whatever, 94 or something. So this is the Watery Domestic EP by Pavement. And when I went into it, it had a calendar.
You found a calendar in there? So you came in, you bought the record, you grabbed a calendar, and you put it in.
And I put it in the record.
And it's been sitting in there ever since.
Yep.
What's the date?
October 93.
Oh,
this is a big deal to me. Okay.
Yeah.
So I just found out about this band. We talked about them earlier, Guided by Voices. And there they are playing October 16th with Lamb Chop opening. And I was so bummed.
Why?
Well, because I took a trip to England this month of 93, and I was over there for a full month. And I had a blast, and I could talk about that for an hour. And I saw bands and bought records and blah, blah, blah. But I was so bummed that I was missing this show because the band I wanted to see the most was actually coming to play at your place while I was in England. And I've never talked to anybody who was at that show. And I wondered if you remembered it at all. Were you there when they played?
So I was, and I do remember it. Here's a little.
I'm finally going to get a Lucy's Guided by Voices story.
Well, maybe. No, maybe, because I think here's a little insight into what running a club is like. You book a band like Guided by Voices, and your anxiety level is through the roof because you don't know if they're going to show up. You don't know in what condition they're going to show up. Are they going to play the whole show? Are people going to be disappointed? You know, there's a whole host of these anxieties that are running through your head, in addition to just like running the store, in addition to, you know, is anybody going to get hurt in the mosh pit?
Right.
So all that to say, that was a great freaking show. like they showed up and they played, and Bob Bollard was like not too inebriated when they played.
Well, they couldn't drink through the show there, I would think, unless they broke the rules.
And we don't know if I don't know if they snuck anything in the back.
Yeah.
there was, all sorts of things going on in the parking lot across the street. So,
Yeah.
I mean, but again, you're right. During the show, he couldn't. But so maybe that did. Oh my God, I never thought about that. Maybe that did actually.
That was one of the first things I thought about is how could they
Yeah.
be playing an all ages non-alcohol serving venue? That seems very out of character. For them, but
Yeah. And that was great. It was a really good show. And then having, of course, Lamb Chop.
yeah.
Let's see, October of 93. I don't think Kurt and I were dating.
When did you have that? Was it an anniversary party and you had a keg of beer?
That was my birthday party.
That was your birthday party.
That's right. That was July of 1993. So
July
yes.
of 93.
Yes.
So you were dating Kurt.
I was, yeah.
Yes, because I asked you out on a date.
Oh, didn't we go out on a
We
date?
did. We went out on a date.
Where'd we go?
We went to Iguana. The Iguana.
We did.
I thought of the Iguana.
And didn't I tell you? I went out on, oh my God, it's all coming back to me.
Yeah, yeah. You were so nice, and I thought we were having a blast. Well, we were having a blast.
We did.
We were having
We
a
had
good time.
Yes.
And it's at one point you were like, "Well, I really need to let you know I'm sort of seeing somebody."
Yeah.
And it was Kurt.
Because it was very new.
Yeah.
And we weren't telling anybody.
It took me a lot of nerve to ask you out. I just thought you were awesome and had such a good time going in and talking to you anytime. And I thought, man, she owns a record store. That's pretty cool.
Baby, I shot your girlfriend. She was eating her fingers. Just
At some point, Doyle from Great Escape becomes Doyle from Grimey's.
Right.
So
Well, you can thank Mike Grimes for that.
thank you, Mike Grimes.
Thank you, Mike Grimes. Yeah. I thank him regularly. I wouldn't say all the time, but you can thank a lot of things. You can thank the Slow Bar as well as Mike Grimes.
Just to put some context, Grimey's opened in 1999, which was just a few years after Lucy's closed.
December of 99.
December of
and
99.
that was Mike Grimes opened Grimey's. So I went by there, I think the day he opened. I just wanted to see what he had. And he put his own record collection out. So he had a lot of good stuff. I bought some good records. I've still got them.
So this was all used, right? So
This
it was
all used
direct competition with the Great
with
Escape.
the Great Escape. And in fact, Mike had been coming to me, and I think enough time has passed that I can reveal that I helped him while I was still working at the Great Escape.
I think the statute of limitations
would
has
have been
passed.
against the rules at the time, but he just didn't. He had another friend helping him with the business side, how to get set up taking credit cards, how to, all the things you've got to do to put your shingle out and all that. What he didn't really know was how to do used records and collectible records, and he wanted me to give him some hints, whatnot. So anyway, I just started going to Grimey's a lot, and Mike had, I don't know, this was still very much the CD era as far as being the dominant format. The vinyl revival had not happened. But Mike had 10 to 12 new albums on CD that he personally loved, stood behind, and was determined to turn you on to them. So he was doing a very tight curation, all I've got are these new ones I love, But he was selling records. He sold some to me. And he had the Strokes CD with the butt cover, the import cover, months before it ever even came out in the States. And so, people were being told at Tower who were asking for the Strokes to go over to Grimey's. So through this whole early period, Mike had decided to open a bar in East Nashville. It was an old dive bar called Shirley's in the Five Points area. And really, Slow Bar was the first thing there of any note. It was not a hipster
paradise that it is now.
Correct. It was nothing. And Shirley's was like a blue collar bar. Long neck buds and butt cracks. And, so he, on a wild hair, he and his friend Dave Gerke, wrote a I don't remember how much the check was, but it was $20,000 or whatever. Because Shirley was talking about wanting to sell a bar, and they wrote him a check right then and there and took it over. And so for a bit there, Mike was thinking about closing the record shop and just doing Slow Bar, because that was the shiny new thing that was really, and ultimately, as things have shaken out over the years, that's his spot. You know, he's a great promoter and running a venue. That's where his strengths are.
Because he now Slow Bar closed. Now he has the basement
east.
And basement
yeah, for
east.
any of our newer Nashville listeners who don't remember the Slow Bar, it was sort of the beginnings of everything that became the basement east, East Nashville, whatever you want to call it. But so Mike got this idea in his head that he would convince me maybe to quit my job at the Great Escape and buy half of Grimey's. At the time, I hated my job at the Great Escape, and I was going over there and unloading at Grimey's, bitching about my boss and all this stuff.
What did you hate? Why did
Well,
you?
I had been manager of the store on Broadway there by Vanderbilt throughout the 90s. All this time, I'm going to Lucy's. I'm co-managing. There were two of us that managed the store, and I oversaw the music record department and all that. And so I got a promotion from that to being a general manager. The title on my card said operations coordinator. And basically that meant I took meetings with the owner all day long and like pushed his message down to the managers or however you want to look at it.
Oh, so further away from the actual music.
Correct. Further away from the action and not having my hands on the records. You know, I'm doing some training and some mentoring for others, but I'm no longer doing the things at that job that brought me pleasure. And I just hated it. And again, this is around the time where I'm really pushing for us to carry new music. Now I've got this leadership role just under like ownership at upper level management and thinking this is the time to like make this move and getting more frustrated that he's just flat out not interested in doing it. And so when Mike starts talking to me, I'm like, yeah, I might really want to do that, you know?
How long did it take for him to convince you?
Well, first of all, it took him probably 6 months to ask me. He was telling other people. So that's how I found out.
He's like, yeah, I want to ask Doyle.
He's like, I got this idea. I'm gonna talk to Doyle over at the Great Escape. I don't know. But so, yeah, I found out from other people. So I think I actually approached him and like, so what is this thing you want to do? But yeah, so my dad has a law degree and he's a retired banker, and he had a friend of his who was willing to, you know, write us up a LLC and make it a company and do it all on the cheap. And we formed our company and filed all the paperwork and got our federal ID number and all the stuff you need to make it now an LLC from a sole proprietorship. And I bought half of Grimey's with whatever money I had. That was half. But I had some savings. My dad gave me $10,000.
Yeah.
Just like, hey, you know, here you go. And I had a profit sharing plan at the Great Escape, which against all advice, I broke and cashed out because I paid taxes and penalties. But I wasn't worried about my retirement at the time.
Of course not. But can I tell you, that's how I financed Lucy's.
Really?
Same thing. I had a 401k from Elektra Records, and it was about $7,000. And against everybody's advice to just leave it in, and I can't even think about what it would be worth right now. But I was like, well, I want to do this record store, so I need some cash. And yeah, taxes, penalties, and yeah, that's what I used to rent Lucy's and stock Lucy's. That's so
awesome.
Funny. Yeah.
Can we high five?
As high five! Woohoo! Here's to cashing out. Here's to not worrying about retirement.
That's right.
Those were the days.
I'll be fine. So that's kind of the origin story, I guess, of Grimey. So I did it.
And at that point, you were still at the original location.
Right, in Berry Hill.
Yeah. Small little house, right?
I just celebrated my 20th anniversary with Grimey's because I came on board in May of 2002. So Mike had the shop for 2.5 years.
Wow,
or something.
Congratulations.
Well, thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks.
That's a big deal.
It is a big deal. My store manager is in her 18th year right now. It's phenomenal how we've kept this team together.
It is real. Anna?
Anna Lundy, yes.
Yeah, and through a lot of changes, because now you have a record store and you've been trying to convince the owner of the Great Escape to start stocking new records.
Right.
Now you own your own record store.
Right.
And now you could do whatever you want.
Absolutely.
Because Mike is off running the Slow Bar. And you're like, I mean, what was that like for you? Kid in a candy store?
No, I was probably a lot more intimidated than I was excited. Although I was excited for sure. But yeah, it felt like a giant leap. No real security involved. You know, very much a if we build it, they will come sort of attitude. very undercapitalized, as all these creative small businesses always are. And we just had what the resources we had. And I remember very clearly, because I took my money that I had and we took out some of the interior walls. When up until that point, when I came on board, it was still very much the little house with the little house floor plan. And it was a bunch of little rooms. And I thought, we got to open this place up, make it like a retail environment. So we took out every wall that was possible to take out and open the space up. And I wanted to stock new releases. I wanted to be a full-service independent record store. That was my only vision. As broad as that is, that's what it was. I want to do all the things that all the cool record stores that I love and admire do. And that includes in-store performances and live music and drinking beer and live music events in your store. But no, stocking new releases. And it's still very much a CD world. But I really wanted to make vinyl shine at Grimey's from the get-go. It was core in my, what I felt was my mission. So anyway, I mean, I'm only in this will be May to August. So in August of 2002, I get a phone call at the shop from Eric Levin, who owns Criminal Records in Atlanta. I loved Criminal Records. I shopped there all the time when I went to Atlanta. It's right next to, Wax and Facts and Little 5 Points. And so I'm like, oh, hey, man, I love your store. What's up? And he's like, well, are you familiar with Sims, which was the Coalition of Independent Music Stores? And I said, yeah, I mean, I know a little bit about it. I mean, Ear Ecstasy's the Sims store, right? Yeah. Well, we're forming another one because Sims is full. They're not growing. They don't want to add any more stores. And there's still lots of great independent record stores in the country that need to organize. And, there are a lot, and he's talking through some issues in the industry I didn't even know he was talking about, probably because it was still so new to me. I mean, I'd staffed and ran a used record store. So all this carrying new product was all still very new to me. And anyway, I'm being resistant. Like, I just getting started here, man. I don't know any of this stuff. And he's like, well, this will be one of the best learning experiences you could possibly ask for. I'm holding an organizational meeting in Atlanta, and I've invited like 7 other stores, and you should come down and just at least come for the weekend, see what we're cooking up, see if you want to be a part of it. And if not, no harm, no foul. I'm like, okay.
What a great opportunity.
I know, right? I had no idea until we all got together in the room and got through our pleasantries. And Eric's wife made us just some amazing Southern pineapple casserole dish that we were all eating. And her name's Madonna, which I thought was really cool.
That's so cool, yeah.
And anyway, so yeah, we sort of get down to brass tacks, and the stuff they're talking about, I'm just like, holy shit. I mean, I didn't know that. And I remember pulling my notebook out and just starting to write things down. And at one point I just stopped and I was like, where does that come from? Where do you order that from? And these guys just started telling me all the distributors I needed to get accounts with, who to contact at those distributors, and just basically drew me a roadmap for how to do this. And I was like, I've got to join this group. It'll be the smartest thing I ever did.
Yeah.
Outside of maybe quitting my job
and
buying half of Grimey's.
Right.
So I really did. So like the first thing we did, we formed the group. We had 30 stores coast to coast that are all in Ames. That's what we call ourselves, the Alliance of Independent Media Stores. We thought we were forward thinking by saying media instead of music because we were going to sell whatever, right? And nobody knew what was coming. So the first thing we did was a listening station. I had to pony up and buy a Nakamichi Tower listening station, which had 10 slots on one side and 10 on the other. You put the CDs in them, you put the headphones on, and you preview records in the record store. Like Tower.
Yeah.
So I bought the listening machine. I still had my money. I hadn't gone through my my investment capital yet. So I was just like, all right, I'll buy the machine. And then the labels pay for those slots every month. And the cool thing about the coalition was instead of me having to say yes or no to a bunch of individual titles, they all came to the coalition and we voted which ones to allow in. So if some heinous pop thing that wasn't cool enough or whatever, we could keep it out of our program and not have it on our listening station. Because there's a little bit of like, I don't want this thing to look like a chain mall record store. So we were rejecting things we didn't feel fit our vibe. But after just a couple of months of that, I'm getting my checks from the listening station slots, and it pays the rent at the at the Bransford original Grimey's.
Did you change those records out monthly?
Yes.
Or weekly?
No, every month. And the way it was set up, and this was our innovation in Ames that the other coalition stores had not done, was we had a pre-pack. We made a deal with a one-stop that wanted our business. It was a scrappy, smaller one-stop. And so all the CDs, this is a CD program, this is CD listening stations, were all shipped to us basically in one box. We put the product up on the listening stations. We sell what we sell. At the end of the month, you could return it all. So it was basically on consignment. There was no risk. And so titles were also coming in these programs that were voted in that I didn't know what they were. It was on a cool label or whatever. And it was a way to sort of test the waters. You would find that something you wouldn't have thought or chose to stock yourself was something customers wanted. So it was a real nice learning experience. And then we doubled it. We got a second tower and we had 2 of them, and we've gone into all kinds of other programs over the years, but that was, sort of, and realizing that it was paying our rent. Everything was cheap enough that we could make every mistake in the book without tanking the ship. And believe me, I did. I went a long time before I ever did a return. Oh, wow. I got to send all this unsold stuff back. But you couldn't return vinyl. You still can't.
Really?
Yeah. That's the only reason that indie record stores probably are allowed to have as much power as they do in the overall market. Is because if vinyl were returnable, Amazon and Walmart would buy it all up, sell what they sell, and then send the rest back. We wouldn't get any.
Is that a conscious decision? How did that come about?
When vinyl came back, more or less, the labels had already washed their hands of it. They'd shuttered their pressing plants. They'd killed the format, more or less. So Amazon's kind of on the level playing field with me. If they overbuy, they're stuck with unsellable product. But yeah, so vinyl being one way made it a risky proposition. You kind of have to know what you're doing. And it's interesting, if you look at the data of who sells records in this country, 51% of all vinyl records sold are sold at independent record stores in the United States. 51%.
That's fantastic.
Yes.
That's great. But going back to the genesis of Grimey's, from where it was to where it is now in 20 years, what you've done is pretty extraordinary, because yes, I think the reemergence of vinyl has helped Grimey's tremendously in terms of growth. But you also, wherever Grimey's has been, it's been a community of people. And you originally started that because of the things that you like to do at records. It's about at record stores. Yes, it's about the music, but it's also about the live performances and the happy hours and talking about music to people. It's not just transactional money exchanging, goods exchanging.
Honestly, I'd almost say that comes second if I had to rank them. All the things you're describing actually come first. Well, it's core to our mission, like I said.
Yeah, it's core to what you do.
I helped. You helped teach it to me. I saw what you were doing at Lucy's. You weren't just a record store. You were a safe space for all these kids. I was in my late 20s by that point and turned 30 in 95. So, I was not a Lucy's kid, but I saw them. I interacted with them. I went to shows with them. And I saw what you were doing, and I was very impressed. And that made an impact on me. We modeled our store on experiences Mike and I both had going to Waterloo in Austin during South by Southwest. When you walk in the door during South by, they've got in-stores going on all day, and there's a keg, and they hand you a beer. It's like, we'll do that.
Yeah.
And Ear Ecstasy, these were stores that helped form a big part of the vibe we wanted from Grimey's. And, for me, World Records in Monroe, Wisconsin, where my dad took a job for just a couple of years when I was in junior high school. And I rode my bike out to that shop. Tiny 10,000 person town, and they had a little record shop in a strip mall, and the guy who owned it was cool and really into music and had great records. That was my first experience really buying used records. That's the first store I remember that had lots of used records. So yeah, it's just all these experiences that that I had and that Mike had. This is funny reference because, Mike's vision for Grimey's, and this is back to community over capitalism, if you will. But his first vision was he wanted to be the Floyd's barbershop of record stores. And that reference completely falls on deaf ears now.
Unless you're watching Andy Griffith
Exactly,
reruns.
exactly.
What did he mean by that, though?
Well, it's just, all those men in there weren't just getting haircuts. That's where you go to, shoot the shit. And then, for a record store, talk about music, experiences, the recordings themselves, shows, all of it.
You've been in this business a really long time. So you've seen it go from albums, then to CDs as the primary delivery system for music for the consumer.
And cassettes.
And cassettes.
Cassettes were outselling LPs around the time CDs were just starting to take over. Cassettes were already outselling LPs. So the customer was saying, I want convenience. I want to take my music on the go. I want it with me in the car. Walkmans were super popular. I had one in high school. And I was a little introverted and in a weird spot. I didn't, I just wanted to sit and listen to my Adam and the Ants album on cassette on the bus rather than talk to those people. But anyway, but yeah, and CDs, and then obviously somebody invents the MP3, Napster rears its ugly head. Now you can get anything and everything there ever was for free, including all the unreleased stuff. People are going nuts, making bootleg collections and just consuming anything they want without paying. Steve Jobs comes along with the iPod and the iTunes store, and people start paying for tracks. And all of a sudden now revenue is being generated again. And, that runs its course till we get to streaming where we're at now. Which, how counterintuitive is it that now that you could listen to any record you can think of for the price of a cup of coffee per month? And what are people doing? They're going out and spending $25 to $30 a record buying vinyl to play music that they can play on their phone without spending any of that money.
And not just vinyl, colored vinyl is now a thing.
Yes.
So is this more about collecting, or is it more about the music? Because you're right, it is very counterintuitive.
I'm trying to wrap my head around it, Mary. I'm still trying to figure that out. I've gotten some of my very best intel from going on Facebook and some of these vinyl collecting groups, because I get to see the behavior of the new vinyl customer. I thought at first it really helps me understand my customer at the store, what they're looking for and why. But the more I pay attention to it, the more I just see it's a whole different vibe. These people all know that the indie color variant or the direct-to-consumer color variant is going to be worth more in the aftermarket than the black vinyl. They are buying them with somewhere in the back of their mind, there is a collectability factor here. If I decide to let this record go, I'll at least get all my money back, maybe make more money. It's just kind of in there, and people seem to be more fluid with their collections. When I got a record, I fell in love with it. It was mine for life. Never leaving this house except to move to the next house or whatever. And people are now like, oh yeah, I sold it because it's going for $250, and I was able to buy all these other records with the money I got. And so it's not necessarily about keeping the thing forever.
Well, then maybe that goes back to the idea that if you do want to listen to it, you just turn on your stream. You just grab it from your streaming service.
I don't know, but I think people definitely are playing them. And whether or not they're getting all the sound quality out of the format that you would at my house, where I've spent a lot of money on a stereo that sounds really good, because I really enjoy the sound of vinyl far away over any other method. And I stream, I listen to all kinds of ways. And but I think people pay more attention to the music. And that's one reason vinyl is resonating with them. You put on a record, you're listening for about 20 minutes, thereabouts. And then you got to get up and flip it. So there's sort of just a little break in the action. You're mentally refreshed just a little bit. You flip that record, drop the needle back down, starts again. You sort of refocused, It gives you, from sequencing, it gives you 2 cracks at an opening track, 2 cracks at an ending track, creating a little journey along the way on each side of the vinyl. And whether or not people are like tuning in and realizing any of that, somewhere their brain's processing it. in a way differently than when they stream music for 3 hours straight.
Sure.
You just pay more attention. So even if you're not necessarily getting all the sound quality stuff out of your records, you're just paying more attention to the music, and it's resonating more with you than more casual forms of consumption.
Thanks so much for listening. You can follow Doyle on Twitter and Instagram at @TheDoyleDavis and catch up with all the exclusive and the in-store performances at Grimey's on Twitter and Instagram at Grimey's and on Facebook at Grimey's Records. You can follow this show on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Lucy's Record Shop. And please feel free to email me directly at mary@lucysrecordshop.com with any thoughts or feedback and any Lucy's memories that you have or paraphernalia, anything you want to send along. It's always appreciated. Many thanks to Michael Eads for his time and for the use of his studio, and to Lamb Chop for the intro music. Links to full versions of the songs used in this episode can be found in the episode notes and at lucysrecordshop.com. This show is brought to you by Give 40 the Finger Productions and We Own This Town, a podcast network of original entertainment and documentary content. You can find more info at the official site at weownthistown.net or follow at We Own This Town on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time.